Ben Franklin said those who are willing to sacrifice essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither. Hi, Scott Horton here for the Bill of Rights Security Edition from SecurityEdition.com. It's a playing card-sized steel Bill of Rights designed to set off the metal detectors anywhere the police state goes, so you can remind those around you the freedoms we've lost. And for a limited time, get free shipping when you purchase a frequent flyer pack of 5 Bill of Rights Security Edition cards. Play a leading role in the security theater with a Bill of Rights Security Edition from SecurityEdition.com. The Scott Horton Show is brought to you by the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. Join the great Jacob Hornberger and some of the best writers in the libertarian movement like James Bovard, Sheldon Richman, Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, and more for a real individualist take on the most important matters of peace, liberty, and prosperity in our society. That's the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here. Ever think maybe your group should hire me to give a speech? Well, maybe you should. I've got a few good ones to choose from, including how to end the war on terror, the case against war with Iran, central banking and war, Uncle Sam and the Arab Spring, the ongoing war on civil liberties, and of course, why everything in the world is Woodrow Wilson's fault. But I'm happy to talk about just about anything else you've ever heard me cover on the show as well. So check out youtube.com/Scott Horton Show for some examples, and email scott@scotthorton.org for more details. See you there. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here for LibertyStickers.com. If you're like me, then you're right all the time, surrounded by people in desperate need of correction. Well, we can't all have a radio show, but we can all get anti-government propaganda to stick on the back of our trucks. Check out LibertyStickers.com. Categories include anti-war, empire, police state, libertarian, Ron Paul, gun rights, founders quotes, and of course the stupid election. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton, and our next guest today is Max Blumenthal. His website is maxblumenthal.com. He writes at the Huffington Post and for the Nation Institute, and of course he's the author of the book Republican Gomorrah. Welcome back to the show. Max, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Appreciate you joining us on the show today. So now, I've been busy the last 45 minutes or an hour or so. Is there any evolution of the story since the last I heard on CNN, which was there's not quite a ceasefire deal yet, but they're working on it?
Or if you watch CNN, Hamas is Iran, and Iran is Al-Qaeda, and Al-Qaeda is Satan, and Satan is Hitler, and so on. That's the emerging line. No, in the last hour you actually missed a lot. You missed some horrible things. The New York Times' entire staff was nearly obliterated, killed, wiped out in Gaza by a precision Israeli strike, which was actually targeting the journalists in the car behind them from Al-Aqsa TV, which is sort of like the PBS of the Gaza Strip. It's affiliated with Hamas, and they're a news network. And their car was marked press. It had written press on top of their car. Israel targeted them, and I know that because they have taken credit for targeting them. And de facto AIPAC spokesman Josh Block, who is the longtime spokesman for AIPAC, the key arm of the Israel lobby in Washington, is on his Twitter account right now trying to justify the killing of these journalists. I hear another journalist from another network is dead, and according to Oxfam, the international aid group, an Oxfam-funded kindergarten has been destroyed in another precision Israeli strike in the Gaza Strip. So basically, Hamas, I hear, has agreed to the ceasefire, but Israeli officials, according to some reporters I follow who are close to Israeli leadership on Twitter, are refusing to agree to the ceasefire. And I think what they're doing is they're trying to buy time so they can bomb more and punish Gaza as much as possible. If you look at what Israel did on its way out of Gaza during Operation Cast Lead in late 2008, 2009, it was a slash and burn, scorched earth operation where they destroyed everything on their way out, including a chicken farm. They actually killed 80,000 chickens at the only chicken farm in the Gaza Strip. So I guess those were terrorist chickens. And one more thing I'm hearing, and this is, I haven't confirmed it, is that Israel's beginning to shell a refugee camp in central Gaza with white phosphorus, which is an internationally banned chemical weapon.
When I very first moved out to L.A. in 2009, it was the first time I had ever seen CNN International. They didn't offer it on the cable package in Austin before I left. And the first thing I saw was white phosphorus bombs being dropped on Gaza there, January 2009. And I remember being really mad about that. Well, and it's so obvious, too. Everybody knows what it looks like. It's white phosphorus. You can't deny it. That's what they're shooting in the clip. So if that's true, I'm sure we'll see pictures very soon proving it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting this from people in the Gaza Strip who are on Twitter, and I think, it really annoys me, the coverage of Twitter and the coverage of social media in place of the coverage of the war, but it is significant. Like the war on social media, what's going on there? It's like for nerds who aren't interested in the fact that kids are being killed en masse, but
right.
It is significant that this is really the first. Twitter is at a critical mass right now, and this is the first time that journalists around the world are relying on people inside the Gaza Strip who are basically tweeting out the assault. And are being pretty much, everything they say is being pretty much confirmed. They're also tweeting out audio, video, and images of what happened. The image of the car filled with journalists from Al-Aqsa TV was just tweeted out by someone who happened to be on the scene. So it is significant, and, I was following Operation Cast Lead through Facebook. I wasn't really on Twitter at the time, but I think later today on my Twitter account, Max Blumenthal, I'll tweet out a list of people in the Gaza Strip that your listeners can follow, but I think that's really the best way to get the news.
Yeah. Hey, I would really appreciate that if you did. I've been following you very closely, and I'd be very happy to see that list myself. Of course, I see all kinds of tweets coming in from Gaza and from, all over the place, but it's hard to know, a lot of times who you can count on and who you can't. Who has a reputation as who really is a journalist that at least Max has heard of the guy before, but I haven't, kind of thing, as opposed to just somebody. I don't know.
And that's been a worry of, and it's come up with social media that there are people now in Gaza that no one that I trust and no one who's been involved in covering Israel-Palestine for years or involved in the activism has ever heard of before. And there are a lot of suspicions. Mm-hmm. Who are these people? What is their agenda? Who's hosting them?
Yeah, look, if you and I were the Free Republic guys, we would be sitting there trying to hoax Max Blumenthal and get him to take the bait. That would be our only thing to do today,
Yeah, totally. And that's become one of the propaganda tactics of Israel's social media brigades is to either disseminate, is to kind of like bust false photos of atrocities in Gaza and prove that they are, from Syria or that they were from another attack in the past, and in order to kind of dismiss the idea that actually, in fact, about 115 people have been killed in the Gaza Strip in the past few days, and there are somewhere near 1,000 wounded and badly wounded. And so, when you get caught, when people get caught in that kind of, the propaganda war, it distracts from the facts which really speak for themselves.
Right.
But I'm talking about people who actually live in the Gaza Strip and are just talking about what's happening in their neighborhood. And just to sound, Rana Bakr, who's one of the Gaza Twitter people, tweeted out the sound of the Israeli Navy shelling her neighborhood, and it was really stunning. And I don't know how naval gunboats shelling a refugee camp in the second most densely populated area on Earth can be precise, and how they can actually target anything. But this is, I think, significant in terms of the reporting on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, there's so much stuff to talk about here. I think, one of the things I wanted to pick up on that you said was about the punishment of the people of the Gaza Strip. And I wonder whether you think there's anything more to what's going on here other than that. It seems like, they're not even going to try. I don't know if they could, but they're not even going to try to dislodge Hamas. What is the point of this anyway, do you think, Max?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are asking that question because it really seems pointless. It seems like a pointless exercise in sadism. And what I think we're witnessing, first of all, let's note the escalation in genocidal rhetoric from major Israeli public figures, from Gilad Sharon, the Jerusalem Post columnist, who is the son of Ariel Sharon, who had a long career in punishing Gaza, punishing Palestinians. He called for the flattening of Gaza. He said that Israel should do to Gaza what the U.S. did to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Eli Yishai, the interior minister of Israel, called for sending Gaza back to the Middle Ages, which I think was ironic because Gaza during the Middle Ages was prosperous and free. Avigdor Lieberman has said no one is safe in Gaza. This is the foreign minister of Israel. The transportation minister of Israel has called for cutting off all electricity, all water, and all food supplies to the Gaza Strip. And so it needs to, and these opinions are really becoming common, especially in the south of Israel, which is the area that's really been targeted with rockets by Hamas and the smaller factions. But what we have to look at really is the big picture. What is the Gaza Strip? Why is it this way? And we have to go back to 1947 and 1948 to understand that. That 1 million of the Gaza Strip's residents are refugees. They have refugee status because they or their family members, their ancestors, were expelled from their land and their property in 1948, and they're not allowed to return because they're not Jewish. In order for Israel to maintain its charter as a Jewish and democratic state, it must maintain the demographic majority of Jews. Otherwise, if they were a democracy that was actually multicultural, an Arab prime minister could be elected, which would mean the end of Zionism. Therefore, the people who live in the Gaza Strip have to be warehoused. They have to basically be kept in this coastal enclave. They can't really be allowed to even work inside Israel because of the fear that of the state of Israel, that they would strike roots, that they'd marry Palestinian citizens of Israel and upset the demographic advantage of the Jewish majority. So they've created a warehouse for surplus humanity in the Gaza Strip. And when Gazans decided to elect Hamas, because the Palestinian Authority had become so corrupt and was so thoroughly embedded with the Israeli security apparatus, and Hamas had pledged to actually resist dispossession and occupation of Palestinians, Israel sealed off the Gaza Strip. This has been going on for decades, but they finalized the plan, put it under siege. They haven't allowed exports from the Gaza Strip in like 2 years. Imports are all Israeli surplus goods, so Gaza supermarkets are filled with Israeli goods, so they basically have a captive market. And so you have a situation where people are trapped in like a panopticon-style ghetto. They're going to resist at some point. And Israel has no long-term agenda for resolving this plan because it can't allow these people to come back to their land and their property. And what they wished would happen would be that Egypt would take in Gaza and make it part of Egypt, which will never happen. It's part of Palestine. They're Palestinians. And so all Israel can do is what they call mowing the lawn. This is the rhetoric that we hear from the Israeli military intelligence apparatus increasingly. Mowing the lawn means going in and killing a few operatives from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and punishing the civilian population, which means mass civilian casualties, according to their doctrine of asymmetrical warfare, which they call the Dahiyya doctrine, which is that everyone is Hamas. It was put more succinctly by Arnon Sofer, who is the key demographic advisor of the Israeli government. He's the one who issues all the reports on how to maintain the Jewish majority inside Israel. And Arnon Sofer, your listeners can look up this quote, said that if we leave Gaza, if we take the settlers out, which they did in 2005, an Islamic government, an Islamist government will be elected, and our only solution will be to kill and kill and kill all day, every day. And that's sort of what they've been doing. And if you think that the United States has given Israel all the latitude it wants and given it the green light for any operation. The frightening thing is that that's not true. There's a whole lot more that Israel could do to the Gaza Strip. It's why Hillary is suddenly flying out to the region to restrain the extreme impulses that are coursing through Israeli society, and which is really a result of the entire logic of the way the state is set up, and the reason that there will be no easy solution, the reason why there is no long-term agenda for resolving this from the Israeli perspective is, again, embedded in the logic of the way they've set their state up, the way they've set up their ethnocracy. So they have really two options. One is to allow the refugees to return. The second one is to do what Gilad Sharon has called for, to basically commit genocide. How can they get rid of these restless natives? They have no real way of doing it, and they can't commit the genocide. The United States won't let them. There are many people in Israel who would be disgusted with such a thing, the people in Tel Aviv, for example. So what does that lead to? It leads to a corruption and corrosion of Israeli society, and a trend towards fascism, the election of more populist, quasi-fascist figures like Avigdor Lieberman, who pledged to solve the problem once and for all, and the delegitimization of Israel's public image. And so that's really what we're looking at over the next few years. More and more of these mowing the lawn operations, which are morally abominable, and the corruption of Israeli society and Israel's public image reaching unprecedented lows.
Yeah, well, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I believe that you've said before that from your visits to Israel and your interaction with Israeli society, I guess, in Tel Aviv as well as Jerusalem, that you've said, I think, that it's just too far gone now. They will never, this dynamic where the entire population is over and over again rallied against the weak that they're bullying. They have become, worse than the worst right-wing Republicans in their supermajority. And so how can we ever bring them back to decency again? They're completely nutso now.
Yeah, well, you don't hear right-wing Republicans even in the United States. I mean, maybe there are some of them, and they definitely espouse very racist rhetoric, but you rarely hear, someone like Bill O'Reilly or Glenn Beck actually calling for demographic engineering, for maintaining the white majority. I mean, that would be, the death knell of Rush Limbaugh's career. He's pretty much gotten away with saying anything he wanted, but he can never call for maintaining a demographic majority of whites. But in Israel, it's the only place where liberals are able to call for a demographic majority. They base much of their politics on maintaining the Jewish demographic majority. And what liberals in Israel, liberal Zionists, call for is a two-state solution to maintain that. And that has failed. There will never be a two-state solution. There never really was. Yitzhak Rabin, the former Israeli prime minister who signed the Oslo Accords, said 2 days before his assassination that what he wanted was to establish an entity that is less than a state as what was supposed to be the Palestinian state. And so it would be a series of Bantustans, a series of encircled ghettos in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, controlled by sort of a puppet government like the Palestinian Authority. And they've failed to achieve that completely. And so that what they're left with is a one-state reality which clearly resembles apartheid. The African National Congress has come out and officially declared that Israel is an apartheid state. That's its official position now. And if you go to Israeli society, the frustration has led to such high levels of racism, eliminationism, and every poll that I've seen shows that these are mainstream opinions. For example, that a majority of Israelis believe that African asylum seekers who live inside Israel, Israel now has 60,000 African asylum seekers, are a cancer in the body of Israel. They were polled on whether they think Africans are a cancer, and the majority said yes. So it is too far gone, and just from my personal experience, I've never experienced so much racism in an industrialized country, let alone anywhere.
Max, I saw, wasn't it the one of the vice presidents or something, I don't know the official office, but a pretty high-level office during that refugee crisis a few weeks back was even saying that, hey, look, Israel is for the white man.
Right. Eli Yishai, the interior minister of Israel, who himself is not white, his family is from Yemen or Morocco. He's basically an Arab Jew, but he would never consider himself an Arab, said that these African refugees, I'm paraphrasing him, deny that Israel belongs to the white man. And by the white man, I think he just means the dominant ethnic majority, which is the Jewish majority, which in Israel equals the white man. It's a sort of a different racial dynamic than we have in the United States. It's a clear colonialist mentality, and we have to see Israel as a settler colonial state, and all these things that are happening right now, and the untenable situation that Israel's created for itself. We have to see that as something that's embedded in a logic of settler colonialism. Every other settler colonial state has done one of two things. The United States committed a genocide. It got rid of its indigenous population and then left the remainder to reservations, which are now some of the poorest areas of the country. You never hear from Native Americans anymore, except as part of our fun and games. They're mocked as sports mascots, and we name military hardware after them. So they're clearly not a threat. In Israel, the idea of naming mascots after Arabs is insane. It's something they couldn't imagine, because they still have to face this indigenous, what they consider to be an indigenous enemy. They're still in the settler colonial reality. So after the United States was able to successfully commit a genocide in the 19th century, in the era when this kind of thing was acceptable and widely done in the Western world, it made a transition into liberal democracy. Israel is going in the opposite route because it can't do that. South Africa was another settler colonial state. It was an ethnocracy, and it was unable to commit a genocide, and so it unraveled. It collapsed. Israel had a close alliance with South Africa for decades, and they learned a lot of lessons from the South African experience, and they've managed to adjust very well to a lot of the challenges of settler colonialism. But in the end, they won't be able to. The adjustments are just short-term Band-Aid solutions. And in the end, they have really no long-term agenda to get out of this. And so, again, it all goes back to changing dynamics in internal Israeli society, which trends towards fascism or to the extreme right becoming the mainstream, because of a frustrated public naturally is going to look for these kind of populist solutions and turn towards demagogues.
But now, here's what's confusing to me. And I know it is hard for me to put myself in Benjamin Netanyahu's shoes very well, but I try, and I think that, wow, if he could have got a peace deal where he could turn Hamas into jail guards working for him at the giant juvenile prison that is the Gaza Strip, then why would he kill the guy that he was working on the peace deal with? That seems like a pretty good deal compared to, a cast lead every 3 years or 4 years.
That's a key question, a really good question. I had thought, and this is where Israel's been very smart in being able to sustain what other states like it, other ethnocracies have found unsustainable. They've created occupation subcontractors and groomed them very well and maintained them through a combination of punishment, like what they did to the West Bank in the Second Intifada, and then reward, pumping money through international donors into places like Ramallah and Bethlehem to an exhausted public and giving them, what Netanyahu calls an economic peace. And I thought, with the Gaza Strip, they would try to domesticate Hamas. With the Arab Spring, we've been seeing Hamas move out of the orbit of Iran and move more closely into the orbit of Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt, which is now run by the Muslim Brotherhood. These are much more natural allies for a Sunni Islamist group like Hamas. And they had Ahmed Jabari, who you mentioned, the military chief, regularly on the phone with Israeli officials. He negotiated the release of Gilad Shalit. He was, according to Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, Israel's subcontractor in Gaza. So I thought they had all the pieces in place, and now they go and destroy it all, assassinating Jabari on the first day of their assault on the Gaza Strip. They didn't anticipate Hamas having the range that they've had in their rockets, and so Hamas has managed to penetrate the Tel Aviv bubble and actually create shock and fear in the lives of people in Tel Aviv who had always sort of looked at their city as a refuge from the conflict. And this has, intensified the desire to punish Gaza in Israeli society and upset the process of domesticating Hamas, whose goal, I think, is to basically upset the status quo so they can end the siege. Now, there's another factor in this, which is that Israeli elections are coming up, and Benjamin Netanyahu was under pressure from Ehud Barak, who is his defense minister, who originally comes out of the Labor Party, and is very hawkish, very militaristic, and very close to the army. Actually, Barak was Netanyahu's commander in an elite commando division. So they have this long relationship going back to the 70s through the military. And Barak was going to challenge Netanyahu and say he's been weak on Gaza. He hasn't punished Gaza enough because of the periodic exchange of rockets and missiles. Then Netanyahu had a series of other challengers who also boasted credentials in punishing Gaza, like Ehud Olmert, who's mired in scandal, but he was the prime minister during Operation Cast Lead. He oversaw the killing of 1,400 people in Gaza. He was going to run in the election against Netanyahu. And so and these are people, Barak and Olmert, who are accused war criminals for what they've done to the Gaza Strip. They're named in the Goldstone report. They have trouble traveling. Netanyahu is not an accused war criminal. He doesn't have trouble traveling anywhere. He's not named in the Goldstone report. He's out of the government. And that is actually a liability in Israeli politics. And so there is a political motivation for this strike, too. And it, again, works against long-term Israeli interests. There really is no long-term thinking here.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that we have to leave it at that because I still have a lot more questions. I hope we can reprise this and continue talking about this as the story develops because it sure ain't over yet.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, appreciate it. Everybody, that is the great Max Blumenthal. MaxBlumenthal.com is where you can find his great blog, also at the Huffington Post. And, of course, his great book is called Republican Gomorrah.
Hey, folks, Scott Horton here for Veterans for Peace at veteransforpeace.org. I'm not a vet, but if you are, I'd like to ask you to consider joining Veterans for Peace. As you know, in matters of foreign wars, a veteran's voice is given much more weight. Well, Veterans for Peace is making veterans' voices heard in ways and places where they can really make a difference. There are more than 175 chapters of Veterans for Peace in all 50 states, working hard to eliminate nuclear weapons, seek justice for veterans and victims of war, and abolish war as an instrument of American national policy. It's the Peace Vets versus the Chicken Hawks. Join up the good fight at veteransforpeace.org. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here. After the show, you should check out one of my sponsors, wallstreetwindow.com. It's a financial blog written by Mike Swanson, a former hedge fund manager who's investing in commodities, mining stocks, and European markets. Mike's site, wallstreetwindow.com, is unique in that he shows people what he's really investing in, updating you when he buys or sells in his main account. Mike's betting his positions are going to go up due to the Federal Reserve printing all that money to finance the deficit. See what happens at wallstreetwindow.com. In an empire where Congress knows nothing, the ubiquitous D.C. think tank is all. And the Israel lobby and their neocon allies must own a dozen. Well, Americans have a lobby in Washington, too. It's called the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. They advocate for us on Capitol Hill. Join CNI to demand an end to the U.S.-sponsored occupation of the Palestinians and an end to our government's destructive empire in the Middle East. That's the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. Hey ladies, Scott Horton here. If you would like truly youthful, healthy, and healthy-looking skin, there is one very special company you need to visit, Dagny & Lane at dagnyandlane.com. Dagny & Lane has revolutionized the industry with a full line of products made from organic and all-natural ingredients that penetrate deeply with nutrient-rich ionic minerals and antioxidants for healthy and beautiful skin. That's Dagny & Lane at DagnyandLane.com. And for a limited time, add promo code SCOTT15 at checkout for a 15% discount.